Hello, everyone. Someone has left their glasses here. I'm going to, wow. No, they don't match me. Okay, so welcome to the session. I think I've talked to many of you before. I'm happy to see you here. This is a short journey of my life so far. That's where I was born. I'm a little bit older than I look like. I got graduated. This is softer than I expected. And for a while, I started investing a lot into learning different methods, systems, and getting certified. And this is today. I'm here with you. And for my work, I first started in construction projects. I was in the project management team, responsible for planning, monitoring, analyzing, and things like that. But then gradually I moved to process plan projects. And that was very interesting because in here, we were working in projects with 400 or 500 people, and suddenly when I came here, it was 4,000 or 5,000 people. And when the scale changes, suddenly everything becomes different. And again, I moved to IT projects, and it's very different. What I really love to do is writing. I first started translating books into my mother tongue, Persian, and then I started writing my own. And so far, I've done about 50 of them. The other thing was giving courses, which I liked, but when you give classroom courses, you keep repeating the same thing over and over and over and over again. So it becomes a little bit boring, at least it's for me. So I moved into building e-learning courses. You do it once, and you try to do the best thing you can, and then everyone can use it. And finally, these years, most of my time is spent on contributing to standards. One group is P3.express, Micro P3.express, P5.express, and Noob, which is our topic today. And the other thing that I've been part of was PMBOK, the 7th edition. Is anyone familiar with it? Only 2 people. And I was also a consultant for Prince2, Prince2 Agile, and MSP. Does anyone know Prince2? That's also interesting if you're interested. And now I have a question. There are 2 questions, and based on the combination of your answers, there will be 4 possible choices. I'm going to ask you to raise hands for that, okay? The first question is, in your opinion, is having a project manager role incompatible with agile product delivery? If you think they are incompatible, your choice would be A. But if you don't think so, you come here, and then the question is, given that they are not fundamentally incompatible, do you think it's a good idea to have a project manager in Agile? If you think it's a good idea to have a project manager, your choice would be D. If you think it's not a good idea, your choice would be B. And if you think that sometimes it's a good idea and sometimes a bad idea, your choice would be C. Okay? Think about it. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. Okay. Who believes in A? 1 person? 2 people. Who believes in B? 1, 0. Who believes in D? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And who believes in the conservative version? C? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah. It's usually safer. So that's how we're going to start. And I'm going to start with something really simple and basic because then we can build on top of. And it's about the fact that there's a difference between project management and project manager. This is a combination of different functions or activities, and this is a role for a single person in a project. And when it comes to the role, we have 2 different options. One is like this, where we have 1 or a few people dedicated to the project management activities, to coordination, collaboration, facilitation, problem solving, and things like conflict management, and things like that. And when you have a setup like this, one of these people would be the head of those project management team members, and that person is a project manager. This setup is centralized project management. The other alternative is something like this, where each team member, besides their own technical responsibilities, also contributes to the management of the project. And this would be decentralized project management. Normally, we can do it only when we have a small team. You cannot do something like this when you have 300 or 400 people, obviously. Now, where you draw the line, that would be a difficult topic to cover. In the first generation agile methods, most of them, almost all of them, were like this, when you think of DSTM or even XP. But there was one exception. What was the exception? What's the best example of this? Scrum. And then Scrum became the dominant system. So everyone who's doing Agile now is either using a Scrum or something that is highly inspired by a Scrum. And they've all inherited this thing from that. And therefore, many people think that having a project manager is not compatible with being Agile, which is not exactly right. There's no fundamental problem here. It's just different ways of collaborating. Now, the other way? Yeah. We do project management because we want to be more successful. But it doesn't matter what we do here. It never guarantees success, obviously, for many reasons. One of them is that there are things that are out of our control. We can't do anything about them. But even in addition to that, am I losing this? I may be a little big-headed for this. Okay. In addition to that, there's the fact that we have multiple layers of management. We have a whole ecosystem here. And in order to be successful, you have to pay attention to all of them. And the problem is that sometimes we see something in the project management layer, a problem, an issue, but that has a cause in a different layer. And if you try to solve it here, you won't be able to do it. A common example that I've seen a lot, there was a company that asked me to help them fix their project management system. I went there. And when I checked to see what the setup is, I saw that they have 80 developers. And those 80 developers work on 130 projects at the same time. So it doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter how you manage your projects. They will never be okay. That is a problem there. The problem is that they are working on too many projects at the same time. And these layers, here for project manager, we are focused, project management, we are focused on something we are creating, the outputs. In many cases, creating the output is not enough. You also need to have extra things. For example, you create a new piece of application for a company. Then you need to have training. Sometimes you need to migrate data. Each of those things is a separate project. The combination of all those projects together is program management. And we need to separate it because the way you manage programs is different from the way you manage your projects. And up there, portfolio management is where we decide which projects make sense to us, which ones are justifiable, which ones we want to do. We typically say that portfolio management is about doing the right thing. Project and program management is about doing the thing right. This relationship is sometimes complicated. But when we pay enough attention to all the layers, we gradually get used to seeing those relationships and become able to fix them. My head is really big, isn't it? Okay, so the idea is that we want to have something appropriate in all these layers. But that's very difficult to create all those systems. It takes a lot of trial and error. And if we want to do that, it would need a lot of time and a lot of money. We simply can't afford it. And that's why we can use lots of systems. Each of these things have been created by the involvement of many people through the years based on a lot of experience. And it's just an example of some of them, some of the most important ones. There are even more. And when you want to use them, you have to be careful because they help you in different ways. They are not the same. Now, there are a few attributes that are important here. I'm really losing the microphone. The first attribute is that some of them are roadmaps and some of them are advice, structured advice. A roadmap is one that shows you the way throughout your project or program or portfolio. But structured advice is something you cannot use directly, but you need to have a roadmap first and then use the guide to enrich your roadmap. A roadmap is typically called a methodology or a framework, but those words are used with many different meanings. That's why I call them roadmap. So remember that the first thing you need is a roadmap and not a guide. The second point that differentiates these things is that some of them are general and you can use them in every type of project, but some of them are domain specific. That's again important because each time you want to use something that is domain specific, you have to make sure that it's a good match for the type of project you have. Another thing to consider is that if you go for something that is general, the extra advantage is that your expertise becomes more portable if you ever want to change your job, your industry. These things here are all domain specific because they have something in the technical management layer. Technical management is where we are thinking about things like in IT, for example, you think about your programming paradigm, about different practices you would use. Are you going to use test-driven development, pair programming, things like that? These are technical, but also have a managerial approach to them. But if you go to construction projects, you will be thinking about entirely different things. In a concrete structure, you will be thinking about the sources of water you would use for your concrete, different types of destructive and non-destructive tests for the concrete, and so on. In here, we also have a few systems that are more or less general, but they are leaning toward construction projects here. These are more going toward IT projects. And Prince2 is a very interesting option because it was originally designed for IT projects, but then it became general and applicable to every type of project. The other property is that some of them are minimalist and some of them are maximalist. The minimalist system is one that focuses on the most essential things because that makes it simpler and more realistic, more practical to use. But a maximalist system tries to cover as much of the helpful things as possible. Based on the experience, we could never really successfully use maximalist roadmaps. All the successful things were minimalist. Think of Scrum, for example. And the final attribute is that some of them are libre, like open source, And some of them are proprietary. Using proprietary things is a little bit risky because you have to invest a lot of your time and energy gaining the expertise and sometimes creating something, a capability to give consultancy services or training services, and then overnight they may change their policies and suddenly expect you to pay them a lot of money to be allowed to continue doing what you do. And if you don't, all your investment is gone. Going for libre options is safer because of that. I go the other way all the time. The buttons are reversed, aren't they? Okay, so the other thing that is important here, if you focus on project management, here we have a few interesting systems, but what is in common here is that none of them cover the whole project management layer. And that has been a problem for a long time. That's why many people who use a Scrum or something like a Scrum feel like they need something more. They're looking for something extra. That's because it was never part of them to do it. And there's an interesting history about the Scrum, why it happened. That would be long. So anyway, in here, in order to get what we really want in the project management layer, we want to go for a roadmap, and we want something to be complete. So our choices will be really limited. The main problem is that we don't have as many roadmaps as you would expect. And now here, we have these 4 options. And the last thing to consider is that 2 of these, DSTM and Prince2. DSTM is also very interesting. If you work in agile projects, you must really learn about it. But DSTM and Prince2, both of them are maximalist. It's very difficult to use them. So if you filter them, all you have is P3.express and micro P3.express. And in fact, that's why these are created, because there was a gap. The idea was to fill in this gap because many people had problems here. And one last point, many people ask, can we combine Scrum with P3.express? What do you think the answer is? Yes, and yes, and yes. And the answer is no. The short answer is no. There's a problem here. You see, Scrum has this little bit here in the project management layer. So if you want to combine it with anything here, it's not only about P3.express. If you want to combine it with anything, there will be an overlap. And in that overlap, you have a great potential for conflict. A really simple example is that the Scrum uses a distributed project management system, as you know, meaning that it doesn't have a project manager and it should not have a project manager. But in P3.express, we do have a project manager and we must have a project manager. So, for those who are using a Scrum, the best option is to replace that with one of these 2, XP or Kanban development. Now, XP, no one knows much about it anymore, and it's a little bit too disciplined for most people, so let's forget about that. Kanban development is practically a Scrum without that part. So when you move there, then you can easily combine it with anything here, including P3.express. All right. So the other way. Yes. Next, I'm going to tell you a little bit about P3.express, how P3.express works. But does anyone have any questions before I go on? Sorry. Last chance.
How does it work?
Okay, I'm going to answer that. That's how it works. So this is the P3.express process. Each of these nodes is a project management activity, and they are in different activity groups based on the concepts behind them and based on when they are run. Or the other way. So, in here, first we start the project by project initiation. And that's where we create a team, all different types of experts needed for the team, different roles like the project manager and so on. And then these people would work together and create a common understanding for the project in these activities. That is a high-level plan. And then using that information in here, we will decide whether or not we want to run the project, whether it makes sense to run the project. Now, there are a few important things here. First, if you have an external customer, this is when you sign the contract. And what it means is that the same people who would run the project must be involved here in creating the contract. Because when someone else, another group in the company is responsible for that, we end up with a contract that is full of nonsense. And the other thing is that in here, sometimes we decide not to run the project. It doesn't make sense. That's why we do that. It's one of the main reasons. But still, we have the formal appointments here. Even though the project is not approved for execution yet, we want to have appointments here. We don't want to send tasks to different departments, but we want people from different departments to come to the project, be appointed officially to the project. Because in that way, project makes sense to them. It will be more than a set of random activities. And at the end of project initiation, we have something we call focused communication. That's where we tell everyone in the organization that we are going to run the project. These focused communications are really important for us because people need to know. Sometimes when you tell everyone that we are going to run a project like this and that, someone comes and tells you, oh, wait, we're going to do something in 6 months, and it will have conflict with what you are going to do right now. Or someone comes to you and says, well, I'm happy you're going to do this project. I have a great idea for you. These are all great opportunities that we shouldn't lose, and it's very simple. And by having this here, it's a continuous reminder. You reach this activity and say, okay, it's time for focused communication. I'm going to do it now. Okay, after we initiate the project, we will run it, and when we are done, we reach project closure. That's where we tie up the loose ends, evaluate satisfaction, archive the project documents. That's super important for us, because when you run another project in the future, what you have created here would be super helpful. So from day one of the responsibilities of the project manager is to ensure that everything we create is simple, clear, straightforward, something we can really understand after a year or two. And in here, we will archive it properly. We even have a formal activity for celebration. And it's important for us because it creates a good feeling for people. They understand that they are important for the project. It's an investment for the future. A lot of the things, more than maybe 60 or 70% of the activities here are about people. That's the most difficult part of projects. And finally, at the end, we have another focused communication to tell everyone that the project is finished. So, between those two things, we will run the project in monthly cycles, 1 month at a time. And the same way we initiate and close the project, we would initiate and close each month. For the monthly initiation, the other way, we start by revising and refining our common understanding. We will revise the high-level plan and add details for the upcoming months. And we do that by our artifacts. These are the artifacts we have in P3.express. There are 4 standard artifacts and 1 non-standard one. Project description contains textual general information about the project. Why are we going to do it? Who are the stakeholders of the project? What problem are we going to solve? That's here. Deliverables map is a breakdown of the building elements of the product. And we usually use a mind map for that. Follow-up register is a register for everything that requires follow-up. That's risks, issues, change requests, improvement plans, and lessons learned. We don't separate them. We put them together in one place and use a simple process that is applicable to all of them. And for that, you can have a spreadsheet, or you can use a task board, a Kanban board. Both of them are fine. And there's a health register. I'll tell you about that later. And the non-standard one is the schedule, which is created based on the deliverable map, which means that it could be here, actually. And there are 2 types of a schedule. If you have a predictive project, it will be based on the dependencies between the building elements. And you would use critical path method and probably a Gantt chart. But if you have an agile project, you will usually have a priority-based schedule, something you would implement in a task board, in a Kanban board. So, anyway, those are the things we will revise here. And after that, I go the other way all the time. After we do that, we have to think again, does it still make sense to continue the project? We ask that question every month because it happens a lot that we start a project that makes a lot of sense, but it loses its essence because something changed in the outside environment, or maybe it's more complicated than we thought. So every month, we ask ourselves. It has 2 advantages. One is that we won't continue projects that don't make sense anymore, and the second one is that it's a continuous reminder that we are doing the project for its benefits. And the focus communication, where we tell everyone in the team what we expect to achieve in the upcoming months. We go on through the month, and toward the end of the month, we have this. But something else that is important is that we have this concept of peer reviews. Each time we have something important to do, like the go, no-go decisions, here, and here towards the end, we use peer reviews. That's where you, as a project manager, go and bring another project manager from outside the project, and together you will check everything to make sure you've not made any mistakes. There are sometimes simple mistakes, but you don't see them because you're too close to the work. When someone with a fresh set of eyes comes, they can see it. That's the first advantage. The second advantage is that when you work together, you will learn from each other. Both of you learn something. So gradually, you're spreading a lot of knowledge in the organization. And that's one of the reasons that our rule is that each time you should ask someone new to be your peer reviewer. And if you're more interested, you can go to Frank's presentation, which is all about peer reviews. It was yesterday, so you need to be able to time travel. That's your problem, not mine. Okay, so we are done with monthly initiation. And then we have monthly closure. In the monthly closure, we evaluate everyone's satisfaction. The team members and the managers in your organization and the customer and everyone else who has an impact in your project. And we usually do it anonymously because we want them to be comfortable telling us what they feel. And it's super important for us because we don't want the problems to pile up and become a monster we can't do anything about. If there's something wrong, we want to find out about it as soon as possible. Hopefully, it contributes to conflict management. After doing that, which was also a good presentation about conflict management, but again, you would need time travel. It was yesterday. After that, we bring everyone together and try to come up with improvement plans. There are two reasons for doing it together with all the team members. The first one is that when you have so many people, a lot of great ideas come up. And the second one is that you will have the buy-in of those people. They will help make it happen. And finally, we have a focused communication where we tell everyone, all team members, what we have achieved during the month. So, that was about the beginning and the end of the month. And during the month, we have the weekly cycle. And in the weekly cycle, we will measure our performance, see how fast we are going, and in which direction we are going. And based on that, we will have some adjustments to the way we work. And there will be a small focused communication. This focused communication is where we tell everyone in the team what's going to happen next week. And the idea is that we do have lots of plans. We do our best not to have any conflicts, but still there may be something. And when we communicate the work of the next week, people who have potential conflicts with each other, they will come forward, talk about it, and we won't run into problems. And finally, in the daily management cycle, we have two activities. One of them is about deliverables, user stories, if you will, and the other one is about the follow-up items, risks and issues and so on. We just follow up on them until they are all closed. And one rule in P3.express is that each item, each of these two, must have a custodian, someone who follows up on them and reports back. That person is not necessarily the same person who does the work, maybe it's someone else. But we want to distribute this throughout the team and involve more people here. And something else that is the responsibility of the project manager here is to make sure that we are not working on too many deliverables at the same time. We want to focus on a few of them, finish them, and then go on to the next ones. There's usually an optimum level, and usually the optimum level is much lower than what most people expect. And finally, here. So, at this point, the project is finished. It's gone, it's over. But we still have the post-project management cycle. And in this cycle, we go on for a few years, and we run it every 3 to 6 months. We first check to see what the benefits were for the project. We check the benefits, and then based on that, we start thinking, how can we improve that? Sometimes we can come up with the small activities that can improve the benefits, and sometimes we come up with ideas for new projects. And it ends with a focused communication as usual. That's where we tell everyone in the organization about the benefits realized from the output of the project. And the advantage here is that sometimes those people can come back and say, I have an idea that can potentially improve the benefits. And that was the answer to your question, how P3.express works. Okay, so I don't have a lot of time. For micro P3.express, I didn't expect to have a lot of time, but just a small teaser. This is how micro P3.express works. P3.express is for small, medium, and large projects, but not for mega projects and not for micro projects. Micro project in this context is one that has 1 to 7 people. more or less 7 people. If you have a setup like that, then this is the preferred approach. And it has 3 main differences with P3.express. The first one that you probably notice is that it has 2 main cycles here instead of 3, and there are fewer activities. It's less formal, in other words. The second one is that instead of having roles, we have hats. Because roles are based on having fixed roles. But in micro projects, we usually can't have dedicated people for different purposes. For example, you cannot have a dedicated project manager. So instead of that, we have these hats. And whenever a person wears a hat, that person is responsible for expressing certain concerns. Not for doing those things, but reminding the team that we have to be worried about those things and do something about it. They keep nagging, in other words. And the hats defined in Micro P3.express is project manager hat, which is for coordination and collaboration. Investor hat, which is about money, return on investment, benefits. Creator hat is for creating the output. That's a technical hat. And user hat, it's about the concerns related to the users and customers. So that was the second difference. And the third difference, the other way. Oh, for the hats are not fixed. There are these points where we change the hats. That's one of the ideas. It's really helpful. So people will be all involved in the management of the project somehow. And the third difference is that instead of having those 4 or 5 artifacts, we have this integrated project board, and everything is here. These are the deliverables, user stories, if you will, plus follow-up items. Follow-up items are issues, risks, change requests, improvement plans, and lessons learned. All of them are here. But the same rules apply. So each cart must have a custodian to follow up on and report back. And here we have the fundamental definitions for the project. We won't move them. They are always here, but we will update them. And the whole thing is something you can implement in a simple task board and a Kanban board, something like Trello. Okay, that was Micro P3.express. So, it was really short. If you're interested in learning about them, you can go to the websites. The manual is available there. It's free, as I told you before. And in addition to the manual, there are extra things. For both of them, there are a standard slides for trainers who want to teach any of these things. And for P3.express, there's also an interactive game, interactive story, where you will play the role of a project manager. You will go through the story, make decisions. Based on those decisions, you will go to different paths. You will have different experiences, and that's how you can learn. And finally, there are many new modules that will come out in the future. If you want to be informed of those things and contribute or use or anything else, you can subscribe to the announcements emails, and this is the link. I saw that a few of you copied it, took photos. Okay, do we have any questions? Please. Oh, thank you. That's a good idea. So, we have questions.
Thank you. That was very interesting, actually. So, first, I wanted to, for some reason, ask about why monthly. But then I started to think, like, why does it bug me? So basically, the ask is like this. Imagine that my projects are mostly and sometimes not micro, like 1 to 7 people. It might be more, and they might be lengthy, but sometimes people are only partially involved in them, or they are generally very beneficial for the project, but are only partially involved in the company. So
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah,
That's a common case.
Would that be like a micromanagement, a micro P3.express or just P3.express? Is that applicable? And like, what are the risks there?
That's really up to you to judge. It's not possible to have exact rules here. What we say is more or less 7 people. So if you have 5 people plus 4 part-time people, you can judge. And it also depends on the type of product. If you have a type of project where people do more or less the same thing, there's more potential for conflict. And therefore, you need to go through a more formal system sooner. But when you have another type of project where people have broadly different types of expertise and work, you can stay longer with micro projects, micro P3.express. So for example, if you have a construction project with 100 people, it's a small project. We call it a small project. But if you have an IT project with 100 people, you would never call it a small.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Let me turn this off.
Hello, thank you very much for the presentation.
My pleasure.
And my question is more related to continuous delivery. How does it fit here? Because, for example, in theory, in frameworks as Scrum, you have this on a sprint basis. Yeah.
Your delivery, it's all about your development, and that's a technical management issue.
So that's not handled by this specific
No, it's
part.
not about project management.
P2.express.
No, that's not part of it. It is designed to be compatible with different ways of working. So if you have continuous delivery, it's been considered there, but it's not part of that. So you would go for one of these systems or something similar to them that tells you how to have appropriate continuous delivery for your type of project, something like XP, for example. And then you would match it with P3.express. Because when you think about it, continuous delivery is different in different types of project. It's not the same for everyone. But what we have here can be more or less the same for all projects.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Anyone else? Thank you very much.
Okay, we're done. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice day. Enjoy the rest of the conference.